Minister said that defense matters. And we all seem to agree that defense matters, but we have to draw the right conclusions from that statement. And when we speak about the European Council, it poses a question of the method. How do we want to go about this very important debate? Shall we follow sort of pragmatic step-by-step approach, sort of functional integration, or shall we concentrate on the strategic debate? I think we need a little bit of both. And as the President of the European Council, Mr. Van Rompuy spoke at the conference of the European Defence Agency last week, and he said that his main concern was the state of defence in Europe. So we need to strike the right balance between the three clusters that the Minister has mentioned in his introduction: the effectiveness and impact of CSDP, the defence capabilities and the defence industry. Therefore, I think we need a number of flagship projects, important projects for the European Council in the area of capabilities, research and development, could be cyber, could be unmanned aerial vehicles, or maritime security, or operational engagement. That we need these projects to take the agenda forward. We have to explore the potential of the defense industry. I mean, it's a huge potential, still untapped. I think we should use a little bit of more logic of internal market. When we think, for example, of the question of certification of defense products that remain unregulated, it's a very important burden also to intra-community traffic in defense goods. So once we have a critical mass of those really relevant projects, I think this could help underpin the Europe's strategic ambition. In a way, the debate on defense that is already ongoing will culminate in December. It's part of a broader discussion on European governance. We just need to discuss where we want to go as the European Union in that very important area. Well, defense is not a luxury. Defense is a necessity. The European Union has been recognized by many, including the United States, as a security provider. But if we want to play this role credibly, we need capabilities, we need a solid industrial basis, and first of all, I mean, we need a political will to act. The battle groups have been mentioned today several times. We created the concept many years ago, we never used it. I think it's about time to take a decision. Do we want to continue with a general discussion, or do we want to use this potentially very important crisis management tool? I'd like to mention that the preparations for the December Council are linked to and will run in parallel to the review of the European External Action Service. So it will give us all an opportunity to look at the CSDP structures, the effectiveness of our reaction, and also some of the financial rules that have been discussed yesterday and today. As Minister Shatas said, the European Council is a unique opportunity, and so we must not waste it. We need a strategic reflection on the direction of travel, and this strategic reflection matters really a lot. Sometimes, I mean, I could quote Carl Bildt, who said, while presenting this project of global Europe, that the reflection process matters more than the outcome, because we really have to know where we are heading. But a new strategic concept will not stand the test of reality without European thinking and acting on capabilities. And this has to be reflected in the national planning and decision-making processes. We've made some progress on that, mainly through the EDA Code of Conduct, on pooling and sharing. We really need to link the EU and national level of defense planning and decision making, and there clearly I see a role for the parliamentarians. We cannot do it, we cannot impose it from Brussels. And finally, I would very much like to welcome the suggestion of Mr. Brok yesterday that you devote more attention to defense matters at your next meeting in September, which will be much closer to the European Council at the end of this year. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. As it is now past 4 p.m, we can't accept any more amendments to draft conclusions. We will have these conclusions circulated shortly. Minister, I want to again take the opportunity to thank you for giving of your time and addressing the conference and for responding to the contributions from the floor, and we want to wish you well for the rest of the Irish presidency. So thank you for being here this evening. Thank you. I would also like to thank Mr. Popowski for your very interesting concluding remarks there, sir. Thank you for being here as well and for that. Thank you. Now, as we have now concluded the session sooner than anticipated, I am proposing that we will suspend until 4:30 p.m. Sharp, which will allow delegates to avail of a quick coffee outside, and then we will resume at 4:30 p.m. sharp, please. Thank you.
Go
I start?
Yeah.
Okay, colleagues, can I first of all apologise to you for the slightly late start, but we're just putting the final draft conclusions, and we'll now proceed with the closing session of this conference. First of all, can I say I'm delighted to see such a large turnout still here at the close of the conference, and obviously you must have found this conference stimulating and interesting that you've stayed here for this. So we're delighted that you're here for this closing session, which is a very important part of the conference. And can I also hope that you found the workshops useful, perhaps an experience that can be drawn on as the conference develops in the years to come. I'll now call on the rapporteurs in turn to give us a brief report on the proceedings of each of the workshops which we had here earlier this morning. So the first rapporteur I'll call will be Mr. Dejean. He was the rapporteur for the workshop on the comprehensive approach to report to the conference here this afternoon. So, Mr. Dejean, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will switch to French. Je serai assez bref.
I can keep this brief.
L'approche globale.
The comprehensive approach that Madam Jenny of the EEAS came to let us know that this comprehensive approach was a policy which wasn't really there to merge all the various instruments that the European Union has, but rather was to ensure that they could all live side by side, that they could all bear fruit within a unified strategic framework. After that presentation, I think I could distill 4 principal points from it. There were members of Parliament who were very much up to speed on what our policies are in the Horn of Africa, and I think it gave us a very fruitful debate. So the first point we can distill from all this is that the comprehensive approach needs to be part of a strategic framework. Many of us regretted the fact that the comprehensive approach up to now was quite often something which was really used in crisis situations when things were urgent and which was not necessarily anticipated or needs properly identified. So in the future, what we need to do is to really plan for the future and ensure that the comprehensive approach can be part of a strategic approach even before a crisis starts. Crisis prevention is also part of the comprehensive approach, and it shouldn't just be reactions and responses to crisis. So it's important that you're not always reacting to emergency situations. The second point to distill out of this is partnerships. The EU's comprehensive approach, if you want it to be efficient, if you want it to be legitimate, must be part of a partnership with regional and local players. In the Horn of Africa, for example, this was extremely important, especially if you think about Somalia, for example, where we need to work with the African Union. It was also pointed out, in particular by our British colleagues, that it is the African Union troops, African troops, who are bearing the brunt of the casualties in the military actions in trying to re-establish stability in Somalia. And beyond the idea of the military operation, there's also the idea of regional cooperation and the partnership that the European Union needs to develop with local players. That's what gives us our legitimacy and which ensures that we, in the long term, will have ownership, because without local ownership, the EU's comprehensive approach won't work, no matter how many tools we have at our disposal. this partnership needs, now these partnerships, I should say, need also to look at civil society in the countries in question. And in fact, there was also a reference made to interparliamentary cooperation. That could be useful, particularly in countries which are going through reconstruction, countries which have fragile institutions. The third important point is leadership. Who's steering this global approach? There are a lot of instruments and tools here to be used. And who at the end of the day is going to really guide all this, all these policies? There was a risk referred to, which is the risk of bureaucratic red tape, the idea of this bureaucratic red tape which could dilute the comprehensive approach. And we know that the European Union is perhaps excessively fond of red tape, given the complexity of the mechanisms. It's part and parcel of the nature of the European Union, and that can emerge also sometimes in the guidance of this comprehensive approach. The member states have the responsibility to bear as well here. Within the comprehensive approach, we have tools which are part of common foreign and security policy. In order to implement common foreign defense policy, the member states must be involved. Member states must bear their own responsibility here. This is true when it comes to military intervention. It's important when it comes to mobilizing personnel and for mobilizing capacity. So member states must not be allowed to sidestep their responsibility here. They must not consider that the implementation of the comprehensive approach is only something in the hands of the European institutions. And the European institutions, and in particular the High Representative and the EAS, must play a driving role in the implementation of the comprehensive approach. This is a guarantee of inclusivity. It's also a guarantee that we'll be able to mobilize all these instruments, because these instruments might be in the hands of Council, they might be in the hands of the EEAS, they might be in the hands of the Commission. And the very idea of the Lisbon Treaty was that you have the High Representative, who is also a Vice President of the Commission, and she is the one who has the ability to mobilize all these tools. So if you look at the Lisbon Treaty in detail, if you want to follow the examples we've had over the last 2 years, it is Vice President, High Representative who bears the responsibility for driving this comprehensive approach. And the final important point to distill from all this, we took the example of the Horn of Africa, where amongst the missions being deployed, the European Union was efficient in deploying the comprehensive approach. But there are two things we should point out. First of all, the Horn of Africa is not just Somalia. And some members of Parliament wanted to refer to Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Sudan. It's this entire region where there are varying levels of instability. And we need to take a regional approach and not just focus in on Somalia, even though, of course, there was a certain amount of urgency there, given the instability in Somalia. Another point about the geography here is that you can learn lessons from what's happened in the Horn of Africa. You could use these lessons elsewhere in Africa. Now, obviously, we're thinking here of the Sahel, with what's going on at the moment in Mali, but also, more generally speaking, in other parts of West Africa. Members of Parliament pointed out that piracy is not just happening in the Gulf of Aden and the Indian Ocean, and that it's a matter of concern also in the Gulf of Guinea. We also heard of Guinea-Bissau, where the European Union had a mission which was shut down, and we now see the potential instability being generated, especially when it comes to drug traffickers. So we shouldn't focus ourselves purely on the Horn of Africa. And If we want to take a comprehensive approach, you could think about the whole global policy of the European Union. We would need to perhaps draw up a certain number of priorities in terms of threats that we consider to be significant, focusing on what we feel is affecting us directly, so as not to dilute the external dimension of the European Union. Because let's be realistic here, we don't have unlimited resources. We do need to really focus our fire on this one. Now, I haven't covered everything. We had a very rich, fruitful debate. We had members of Parliament who had quite a lot of solid knowledge on the area, but these are the key points that I felt should be pointed out in our conclusions.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Dijon, for your very comprehensive report on that workshop. And I'll call on the other rapporteur, Mr. Ostrovicius, rapporteur for the workshop on the Middle East process, to report to the conference here.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Indeed, dear colleagues and ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege and pleasure to report to you on our second workshop under the title The Middle East Peace Process, the Role of the European Union. And indeed, the workshop was well attended by many of us, and it was moderated by Mr. Andreas Reinicke, who is the German diplomat assigned to the EU's Foreign Service as the EU Special Representative for the Middle East Peace Process. And indeed, more than 20 of us contributed to this very lively debate on different issues of the Middle East peace process. Indeed, I shouldn't give any impression for you that there is a lack of EU policy line on Middle East peace process, but because of the extreme complexity of this process and the situation in that particular region, I think we have to be ready for better definition of the European Union's policy line, as well as continuous involvement in this issue. And indeed, during our debate, not keeping you waiting for long, many aspects of biggest importance were very rightly described by many colleagues who had a floor and presented their questions as well as comments. I would probably quote some of them as the urgent need for genuine, substantial and continuous negotiations on the Middle East peace process, the need for comprehensive regional solution to ensure long-lasting peace, the importance of a negotiated peace based on two-state solution, and the ongoing determination of the EU to work constructively with all who wish to ensure peace, stability and prosperity in the region, including the United States and the Quartet, and especially regional actors as Turkey and Egypt. In fact, many of us who made contributions emphasized very rightly that the ending of the conflict is a fundamental interest of the European Union. I note this is our neighborhood, and noted the importance of ceasefire agreement in Gaza. Indeed, there was no question that this conflict, already lasting for decades, will ask for certain financial assistance from the European Union on time to be presented and guaranteed. And in fact, very recent developments in the region were very rightly reflected in comments and questions. I would mention the recent visit of President Obama and his speech in Jerusalem, and his strong political commitment for the peace process, and rightly mentioned, it makes very right point for further departure and will add, hopefully, fresh impetus for the peace process in due course. In fact, the situation requires us to recognize the complexity of situation in Syria and the instability which might be coming out because of the conflict, ongoing conflict in Syria. as well as many of us rightly discussed the circumstances and the results of the Arab Spring, although not necessarily very optimistically making conclusions out of it. Colleagues, I think the discussion we had on Middle East peace process was really timely and rightly presented to us as an opportunity for our debate. And I wish to congratulate our presidency for choosing this very relevant issue for our discussion and express, I hope, our common belief that our debate on Middle Peace process will contribute towards finding necessary solutions in the Middle East and hopefully will ensure long-lasting stability in this particular region. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Oireachtas, for, again, a very comprehensive report on that workshop, and to thank both of you for taking time off your busy schedule to be here with us this afternoon. I think that's important, and we're delighted to have you. I'd now like to call on my colleague, David Staunton, Chair of the Defence, Justice and Equality Committee, to make some closing remarks.
Thanks, Pat. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as we approach the end of the second CFSP CSDP conference, I wish to acknowledge and applaud the work done over the last 2 days. The presentations were excellent and the contributions from delegates were considered and thoughtful. The changed format was for the conference, which was requested by many delegations, was, I believe, worth the considerable effort it required. It allowed for a much more detailed, informal and parliamentarian-led debate on the two issues of interest. It is, of course, a matter for each presidency to reflect on the most appropriate format for its conference, but I think and I hope you agree